Hello, everyone. Welcome to our show. Today, we are with the Prisma by Palo Alto Networks crowd. I am so excited for this discussion. We're going to be discussing advanced threats in the public cloud. And I'd like to introduce our guests, Ankur Shah, VP of Products at Prisma Cloud. Hi, Ankur.
Hey, Alex. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited for our discussion here. Alok Tongaonkar, Director of Data Science, Palo Alto Networks. Hi, Alok. How are you?
Hi, Alex. I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing all right. I'm excited for our conversation. And Gaspar Modelo-Howard, Principal Data Scientist at Palo Alto Networks.
Hi, Alex. Happy to be here.
Good to have a data scientist in the crowd. I got to say that. It's always comforts me a little bit knowing there's someone who knows a little bit more about the data than I do. That's for sure. So, but I love to ask the questions. And, you know, our discussion is on threat detection. And what we're really going to be talking about is this tremendous growth in the number of enterprises that are moving to container-based architectures. And I think that's really apparent when you look at the landscape of new companies that are emerging to try to find ways to alleviate the issues. And as cloud infrastructure has developed and how it's being adopted by enterprises, what we're seeing is more concerns about how do you manage it? You know, how do you manage a multi-tenant environment that's fully distributed? What about containers? What about, you know, just to manage and orchestrate containers? How do you think about the threats then? Because that has to be a top concern. I was thinking about it the other night. I was thinking, gosh, you know, what is this like? Is this like, you know, sometimes I think, you know, the boring life is the good life. You know, there's something about life being boring. And when it's not boring, wow, that can be like nostalgia time. It's like, what? I miss those boring days. So I'm interested in discussing kind of the threats and how you can continue to make your life boring to some extent. I do want to say that if you're on Twitter or if you're on YouTube, you can ask questions in the comments. And so again, we're going to be talking about issues about what are the different ways that attackers can attack an enterprise in the public cloud infrastructure and how enterprises can defend themselves from those attacks. And so I want to pose my first question to Ankur. Hello, Ankur. Once again, good to have you here. Here's my question.
Yeah, go ahead. Pleasure to be here. Yeah, this is this like a new Clubhouse or something? Alex, never done one of these live streams before.
You know, I'm a member of Clubhouse, so I think we're setting the tone here.
Yeah. Let's make it popular and another decacorn.
Yes. Yeah. Another corn. Yes. I mean, what is that called in a unicorn? What do they call that? I don't know.
God knows. Yeah. Whatever. I got to ask my kid.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the game that kids play now?
Roblox.
Yes. Yeah.
Roblox, yep.
I'm sure there's lots of unicorns there. Yeah. So my question is, why is security of public cloud infrastructure important and difficult? And how is it really different from traditional security? It seems like almost like a very basic question these days, but it's still so critical because there's so many new attack surfaces. There's so much underlying infrastructure that is exposed by containers. I mean, containers are going all the way down. I mean, they are like going down to the base of the infrastructure.
Yeah.
I've been writing about GPUs a little bit, and containers are playing a role, you know, there, and how you can distribute the workload. So it's really an issue that kind of gets to that kind of dichotomy between what's the advanced threats and what is that traditional infrastructure.
Yeah, it's a good question, Alex. Look, I mean, I've been in the cloud for close to a decade. So the things that I kind of take it for granted is still relatively new for customers who are still moving to the cloud. What I still see today, unfortunately, is that, customers are still using the traditional mechanisms to secure their public cloud infrastructure and the applications. But like you mentioned, cloud is and applications in the cloud are fundamentally different for three reasons. Number one is, basically there's been a paradigm shift over the last 7 years. Back in the days, it's all command and control. IT will approve applications and services that people can use. It's really that simple. And those applications would go through its own security checks. And now the decision-making is decentralized. Developers now have the control over, if they want to use a BigQuery from Google for machine learning, the topic of today's discussion, or they can use, EC compute from AWS. They can choose their favorite service and bring their favorite cloud. So because the decision-making is decentralized, it leaves blind spots for security, right? Like you can no longer have that sort of command and control structure. So that's number one. Number two is that, when I was a developer, and that seems like an ancient history now, we used to ship code once or twice a year. Nowadays, we have customers who are shipping code once or twice a day, if not every hour. So the more you ship, the more your applications are prone to, or more your developers are prone to making mistakes and leaving your infrastructure vulnerable for attacks. So that's number two. And the last thing, but not least, is we have new types of workloads. You talked about containers, right? Back in the days, you have a host, VM, you put a one scanner, you put a EDR tool, and call it a day, and that one tool can take, 1 day to come back to the findings, no problem. Containers are agile, they're nimble, they're spun up and torn down like every day, every second, every minute, right? So there are new types of workloads, containers. We didn't talk about serverless, where there is no compute infrastructure. So the new applications and new types of workloads require fundamentally a different type of security mechanism. So these are the top three reasons why the cloud applications are simply different from the way it used to be done. And you have to build security from ground up for cloud applications. The legacy methods simply won't work. You got to have modern application development in mind as you're thinking about security in the cloud.
So I would actually like to add one more point, Ankur, here. Like, just because of the whole paradigm shift where now the infrastructure is in the cloud, it has become very easy to move the whole application from one public cloud to another public cloud, right? So securing your infrastructure is no longer, you don't know that this is my infrastructure. Today, what you may have on AWS may get moved to Azure the next year or something, right? So we need to be aware of that and try to protect in different public cloud all our applications.
I agree. I agree. And from the attacker's perspective, we work, trying to detect those guys, right? But looking at from their angle, the attack surface, and Alex, you made a reference about that just a minute ago, and Ankur as well, the attack surface has changed. Right. So if I'm the person trying to protect that environment, that cloud native environment, right, I'm going to say, OK, so how can I get attacked? And you see that between the on-premise and the on-the-cloud systems, there's going to be a substantial difference. So you have to take into account those things in order to be effective, in order to prevent or to detect those attacks.
Yeah, well said.
One of the questions that I have then, and it comes up a lot, I work pretty closely with a colleague of ours, Johnny Kiram, MSP, and Johnny's certified in Kubernetes. He's writes about machine learning quite a bit. And one of the conversations we had was about configuration and how developers are being asked to do more configurations, and it leads to issues about, what are those personas that you have, and how is configuration management changing? How is it not sufficient, for most enterprises? There's also vulnerability scanning to consider too. What is not working?
Yeah, good question. So I think, the key to the question here is that, okay, well, why can't just handle misconfigurations in the cloud, like things like, detect leaky buckets or detect overly permissive security groups or overprivileged IAM access, do that, or just run your one scanner on your container images. So basically take care of what I call hygiene, right? Like just the basics. Why is that not sufficient, right? And the answer to that question is, in my view, it's like doing that or doing just that is akin to saying, hey, I've locked the front door of my house and I don't need a security system to constantly monitor the house, right? Like, it's defense in depth. You could lock your house, but you got to have a security system, especially if your house is one from Los Altos or Los Gatos. Like, it's an expensive house. You got crown jewels inside. You got to have a continuous security monitoring system. And the reality is that in spite of your best attempt to lock down the configuration, have a nice, good vulnerability management practice, mistakes happen, and they happen all the time. Things will slip through the cracks and go into production. Once it does, bad actors are getting sophisticated. As you know, with the recent SolarWind attack, the Microsoft Exchange breaches, they'll figure out a way to get in and steal your crown jewels. So the key takeaway here is that you must augment visibility and governance, the basic hygiene, with advanced threats in your cloud so that you can detect these breaches in the cloud. That seems to be in the news every month nowadays.
Yeah, and there's a saying in security that your security is only as strong as your weakest link. So as Gaspar pointed out, that now with the deployment of applications in cloud, there are so many different attack surfaces that we need to take care of. We have to worry about whether the attacks are coming from malicious users, whether they are getting escalating their privileges, whether they are using their network or the storage to attack your infrastructure and resources.
And I think you guys hit it in the head of the nail, because we should not confuse that we're moving into a more agile world, the CI/CD pipelines world and so on, right? With the fact that we have to have all hands on deck in terms with regards to security, right? So Alice, you were saying, hey, I have to do more configuration as a developer now, right? Part of the reason is because things are moving to the left. There is this tendency to think, we're going to be starting to do things before an attack happens, so prevention in a sense, right? And the hygiene, the good hygiene that Ankur was referring to. But that doesn't mean that it stops there, but rather it's a continuous process, right? So you have to keep that in mind. It's through the whole life cycle, and once you come back to the starting point, you will start again, right? So security is not an end goal, but actually a process, right?
Yeah.
So what are the questions that people have out there? If you're watching this on Twitter or on YouTube, you can ask questions in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Look, I have a question for you about the different threat vectors. There's network, there's the user themselves. Essentially, one of my favorite kind of topics to explore is, that essentially now everything is a node, right? Everything is programmable. Practically,
yes.
We're seeing that. We're seeing that real emergence of that, and there's all kinds of attacks that we're seeing that are based upon that. So, what are some of the threat vectors that people should be looking at?
Yeah, you are very correct that now everything is programmable, and that puts an undue burden on developers to worry about security now, right? And not everyone is equipped to do that. So we need things which can protect the developers from making mistakes. And in case there are mistakes made, then we have monitoring in place so that anything that is exposed, which leads to attacks, can be detected and remediated, right? So in terms of the attack surfaces, now you have network is a network. Traditionally, you had the applications deployed on premise. Now you have it in cloud. So you have to protect the network. You have to protect attacks coming from users stealing credentials. So account hijacking is one of the most popular attacks. Then data exfiltration from storage buckets. So like Ankur mentioned that you would like to protect against leaky storage buckets, but mistakes happen, and in that case, what do? You need to be able to detect that someone is exfiltrating data from your storage, right? And misuse of the compute resources. I think that is one of the new things that cloud makes it easy to do, where people are getting into other people enterprises accounts and misusing compute instances to do attacks like cryptojacking.
Well, that leads me to some questions about the data itself then. And, when you're what are the kind of the advancements that we're starting to see, Gaspar, in terms of how you manage that data in a storage environment?
So actually, that's a good point, because, I feel that again, looking from the perspective of the attacker, right? You have to have that put the black hat in a sense for a little while to see what can go wrong, right? And then there's a very nice resource, which is the MITRE attack matrix, right? So if you want to better understand what is, how can you get attacked, right? And what can happen to your data, you can look at this matrix, which is basically going to tell you all the different steps in an attack that can happen, and how can your data be, accessed, exfiltrated, modified, deleted, those things that you are going to be worried about. So within the MITRE attack matrix, there are basically, there's one big bucket, which is the impact. And you can go through that list, that bucket, and see, what can happen. And Alok referred to that, data exfiltration. That can happen. We see these on the news all the time, where we see that, the sophistication of the attack might be very low, but at the end, maybe hundreds of millions of records get exposed, and then you have a reputation impact on your company, plus the economic impact as well, right? So again, not trying to go into too much in depth into the MITRE attack matrix, but it's a good reference, in my opinion, from the perspective of the attacker, to understand what can happen to your data.
And I would like to just add regarding that MITRE attack framework. This is a very popular framework that has been used traditionally by security operators and vendors. And now they have come up with a new framework just for cloud-specific framework, so attacks which are possible in the cloud.
Yeah. And speaking of data, and I think, we all talk about data exfiltration being really the main risk, which is true. But the other one is, obviously cryptojacking. I mean, I remember back in 2018, I think I've got the year right, where there were several attempts because Bitcoin was like trading at around 18, 20K. And then like all of last year, like it was early last year, it was like, struggling. But then now that it's 60K, it's a thing now. So you're seeing it's not just about data exfil, but it's cryptojacking, using your expensive resource. As a matter of fact, we just recently saw an incident where one of the customers' access keys got stolen, and then some bad actor from St. Petersburg, Russia, went ahead and spun up a whole bunch of containers in customers' environment. Like anybody's guess, like why would they do that, right? Like they're going to probably start to mine some crypto. So that's another big thing, right? And we've seen customers whose monthly cloud bill ran up to millions of dollars because of this. So,
and that's a very good point. Very good example, because we think about this CI/CD, this container world, right? And everything is ephemeral, everything's dynamic. So, containers just exist for 15 minutes. So, by the time the attacker wants to do something, the container is down already, right? But that's not the case. Ankur, with that example, is great in the sense that the attackers also step up their game. And they go fast, they go quick, they come prepared, they know what need to do. We have seen many cases of cryptojacking where, if somebody runs into, a misplaced, let's call it, secret key that can give you access to a cloud account, they come in from multiple points, from multiple locations around the world. So they reduce their possibility to be detected, right? And they spun off hundreds of instances within minutes. So they have a complete global cryptojacking setup, infrastructure setup within minutes, right? And they don't care if, you're going to find out about it, within 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever time it takes, to coordinate among the different DevOps and security people and developers and whoever needs to be involved. They don't care, because by the time, this infrastructure is going to get taken down, as Ankur said, they have made some money, and with the price of the Bitcoin nowadays and all their cryptocurrencies, they're making their money and they move to the next target.
So the incentive for the attackers is great now. So they are getting more and more sophisticated with their attacks. They are trying to evade the detection mechanisms, the traditional detection mechanisms, which are based on signatures. So you need more sophisticated detection mechanism based on machine learning as well.
Well, looks like we have a question, which is great. Let's let's check it out. We have a question from Ricardo Enrique Zabalos Morales, who asks, for an organization, when an organization makes the decision to move towards the cloud, what would be the security tips to make that move correctly?
Yeah, I was going to address that as part of one of our Q&A, Alex, but I can kind of take that on right now, and
Great.
so look, I think where the question is coming from, and I understand the motivation for a lot of customers are asking the same question, right? I mean, securing the cloud can be all too overwhelming. Back in the days, everything is in data center. You secure your network. Run one scan, call it a day. Now this is just all too much. There is compliance, there is one scanning. You talked about config management, and then we talked about threat detection across IAM, data, applications, network, all kinds of stuff. It's where do I start? Where do I end? It just can be all too overwhelming. So, the zeroth recommendation is to use Prisma Cloud. No, seriously, use Prisma Cloud. No, I'm just kidding. I have really 3 recommendations. It's actually 4, but I'll start with 0 because 3 is better than 4. Is build your security stack with cloud agnosticity in mind. What I mean by that is don't get too tied up to a specific cloud. You never know, because switching costs are becoming, Alok talked about it, are becoming low. So your developers are going to say, well, today I like BigQuery. Tomorrow I'm going to go Redshift. Next day, I'm going to go use an Azure, service. Yeah. So you got to build security that is agnostic of the cloud, just like your CI/CD pipeline. A lot of people use HashiCorp Terraform. Why do they use it? They're using AWS. Why do they use Terraform? Because they want to make sure that they don't get hooked into a cloud. So make sure your security is cloud agnostic. It's got to work everywhere. Number 1. Number 2, get visibility. Can't protect what you don't see. You got to understand what you have. That's number 1, right? Number 2 is governance and guardrails. Which goes back to the vulnerability and the configuration management that you talked about, Alex, which is what are the things that developers can and can't do. So security needs to have guardrails, have policies and rules in place so that developers know that this is their degrees of freedom in terms of what they can and can't do. That's number 2. And number 3 is threat detection, which is what we talked about, which is you got to have the security system in the house. You got to make sure you're detecting crypto miner, command and control traffic, all kinds of stuff. So you can have threat intel feed, machine learning. And I know AI/ML is the buzzword, right? Everybody claims this, right? Look, I mean, this group has been doing it. And I think Alok and Gaspar has been doing it for decades now. It can be daunting. It's well, where do I start for ML, right? I don't have developers for that. Yeah, you choose an off-the-shelf tool, have simple rules, bring in some threat feeds, threat intel feeds your organization may have, but at least understand where the traffic is coming from. You got to know that first. And then you can start modeling. If you have the developer, if you are a big tech shop, you can build it in-house. If you're not, you got to buy a tool off the shelf. So again, cloud agnostic, have visibility, have guardrails, and have continuous monitoring that's looking at advanced threats. That's my recommendation.
I think we need to bring back Ankur, the developer, back to our team. I mean, that was awesome. Honestly, I gotta say, hands down, great.
Yeah,
you got a job.
Ankur, you raised a great point about the ML part. I think one of the challenges in the cloud world is because the entities are ephemeral, it's very challenging to model the entities and baseline their behavior. So you need to understand what the entities do, how they behave before you can come up with good models for protecting them.
Yeah, and just as we are in a CI/CD world, right? I have, with this Alok and I discussed this. We are in a CI/CD world as well. Continuously attack, so continuous detection, right? And Ankur was referring to that. You need to have visibility. One thing that I have seen, one change when I look at security products from the pre-cloud era and now the cloud era, is that cloud security products rely more on anomaly detection. And there is a very fundamental reason why that is important. And that is that you need the visibility. You need to see what is going on. But because we live in an ephemeral world, right, things change. So what is the best way for you to see if there is some problem going on? Looking for a deviation from the baseline. You see, you have all these containers coming up and down, but at the end of the day, how are they communicating? who are they talking to? What are the ports that they are using? How much traffic do you see, right? So if you see a deviation from that, from your regular benign activity, then that's a good sign. And that's something different that when you were on premise, when you have all these enterprise systems, right, in the old days, right, it was more static. Yeah, things would not change. So you could rely more on rule-based systems. Now, anomaly detection is a very, very good way to have that visibility that Ankur and Alok were referring to, and a good way to find out what is going on in your cloud to detect some possible attacks.
Well, if you're on Twitter or YouTube watching this, you can ask questions in the comments. We'd love to get another question from you. This topic is of interest to a lot of people who I believe have not really had to be exposed to this before, developers in particular. How do you help them find a balance between, the demands that they have to develop applications in a fluid manner with the real concerns that are clear in the attacks that can really affect not just the overall enterprise, but their own work in particular?
Yeah, good question. I can take that on, and Alok, Gaspar, love to get your thoughts as well. So look, the question stems from the fact that developers' number one job and KPI is to ship code, high quality code. Okay, we can tell them about security and they'll pay attention to it, but like people are breathing down their neck to get something shipped quickly as possible. So let me tell you what is not the answer. The answer is not to block them or stop them from doing what they're doing. They got to be productive. Security must be an enabler, not a blocker. Second thing is, don't give them a 400-page, one scan report. They don't have the time. I mean, they're shipping application every day. So you're going to give them a 400-page PDF report that says, hey, your code is this kind of 400 vulnerability, go through the PDF. That just doesn't work anymore. So the answer to this question is, Alex, have security. Gaspar talked about it, part of the CI/CD pipeline. So, if you're using infrastructure as code, scan that infrastructure as code for potential vulnerability. Is a developer mistakenly leaving zeros in a security group, leaky buckets, things of that nature? Also, back in the days when I was a developer, it was sort of, 80% my code and 20% libraries. In today's modern day, like it's 80% open source libraries and 20% code. What you need to do is scan those open source libraries for potential security holes. And you can do that right there at the developer's IDE, if they're using a Eclipse, IntelliJ, whatever to develop the code, to then when it goes, source code goes to the, your code repo like GitHub, GitLab, and then from your CI/CD pipeline. So that's it. Move security to the left, be an enabler, don't be a blocker, make it agile. So if there is a pipeline, the security tool must produce results within milliseconds. Even seconds is too late because things are moving really, really fast. So that's kind of my recommendation to get developers going and get them excited about, security, which is security is not always exciting, but, you got to pay attention to it.
And I think Ankur speaks from his experience because he's breathing down our neck every day, asking us to ship new features and products. But no, in all seriousness, I think there are two things that really stand out for me here to help developers. One is some sort of prioritization. Right now, you have all these tools, which are CI/CD tools or other tools also, which are generating a lot of alerts, right? And developers really need help. They cannot tackle all these 500 alerts that they get and they have to ship the code in 2 days, right? So we need some way of prioritizing. So which ones are the most high priority things that the developers needs to take care of? And second, we have been talking about in this podcast, that it's not sufficient to have just prevention mechanism, but also have some defense mechanism for threat detection, so that even if the developers make mistakes, the tools don't catch something, we have threat detection that can detect anything that is going wrong after the fact. So both go hand in hand. It's not like one can replace the other. You need prevention, but you also need threat detection capability to safeguard against anything that is missed by the prevention techniques.
Absolutely. I will just add very quickly, because everybody on point here, I would say work with them, work with your development team, right? We are not in the days, that you have to convince people about, hey, let's not use an old service like Telnet, let's use SSH, right? Or you need to encrypt your data. Developers really understand that. There's a survey that Palo Alto did last year about the state of cloud environments, right, and how organizations feel about it. One thing that caught my attention is that when you go down the list and they ask them, okay, so what are the threats that you guys are most concerned about, that you worry about, you care about, right? And when I go down the list from 1 to 0, from 1 to 10, and they have, they list everything. They know what they need to be concerned about and worry about and take care of, right? The second thing that I saw is that it's a very uniformly distributed list, because they put priority to all those 10 things. They don't just say one thing and they ignore the other next important type of attack, right? So in a nutshell, then, attack developers, they understand, they know what needs to be done, they need help. So work with them, and I think that will be the best of the results, the outcomes that you want.
We do have another question, and I think it's really relevant to a lot of enterprises out there, and thinking about your traditional server infrastructure, and how do you extend protection to the cloud? How do you bridge your traditional server infrastructure with cloud security?
Yeah, I think with the question, it's a good question, right? Like, I think what they're saying is, and this is true especially with COVID, that not all applications are built with containers and modern application, workloads in mind. So there's a lot of lift and shift workloads going on. So basically, just VMs and hosts coming from. By the way, by traditional, I hope the question is not how do I secure my IBM mainframes. I hope not a lot of people are using it. I mean, and I have no idea how to secure it. I mean, I think they're inherently secure because they have.
You call IBM.
Call IT. I got no answer for that. But for traditional hosts, look, they're commonplace. As a matter of fact, I mean, containers are the new and the cool thing, but bulk of the workloads today are just traditional VMs, Linux-based, Red Hat, whatever running. And I think the same principles and rules apply. Have vulnerability scanning available on that, like what kind of stuff gets put in. Same thing with runtime security. You got to have, EDR-like tools or again, something that, secures your compute. I don't know, Gaspar and Alok, you wanted to add anything else? But it's the same principles apply. It just got to be fast, nimble, but yeah.
Absolutely. When you look at your security strategy, if you go top down, right, the policy at the policy level is going to stay. Whatever you decide you want to do on premise, you need to do it on the cloud, right? It's at the implementation level when you go down, right, that ladder. Then you say, okay, in the cloud, you have to implement this differently from on premise, right? But fundamentally, it's the same strategy across the board.
Right.
Correct. I agree with that.
Well, we're coming up to about the end of our time here. I want to thank you all before we go. Any last thoughts about the direction that you're seeing enterprises take? What are some of the things that you're really looking forward to exploring more when you're looking at this topic? What's top of your mind? I'd love to get just a roundup on that.
Yeah. So I would say for me, the top of the mind thing would be, even now in a lot of areas, we spoke about the different attack surfaces in the cloud, right? And we are thinking about protecting them in silos. But eventually, how do we provide security holistically across the different attack services, right? So how do you see something which is happening in the network and correlate that with something that's happening on the user side or from the IAM permission sides, and build up the whole attack graph, so to speak, how the attacker came in and whether you are able to detect each and every step of the attack.
Yeah, I second that. It's about security orchestration, right? Security automation, and then doing alert correlation, right? There's a big opportunities there. I feel that with the computational power that we have on the cloud and the speed of things, everything moves nowadays. It's really a very exciting day. It sounds like we have been talking about security for decades now for edges, but I just feel like we are at the very start of all these things. So there are new things coming up that are going to help and improve the security, capabilities of your detection mechanisms, or detection systems, right? So I look forward to that, in order to tackle those problems that we have been discussing throughout the program today.
Yep. Yeah, look, not a lot to add. I mean, Gaspar, Alok talked about a few things. I talked about, the visibility, governance, threat detection. I think, one non-technical advice I would give, at least in this area, is that and everybody knows about it, but I think enterprises need to understand and recognize it, that the rate of adoption of new technology continues to accelerate. Salesforce was the first SaaS company back in late 90s. Yeah. It took some of the companies in highly regulated industries about a decade or two to adopt a SaaS technology. Public cloud, we're seeing customers in 5 to 6 years since it started, they're going public cloud. Containers, that's even shrinking. Serverless, it's even shrinking further. So change is happening constantly. The enterprises and the folks in the SOC team, security organization, must have growth mindset, continuously learning new technologies. Old rules don't work anymore. Be prepared for that. This is all solvable. This is not, customers can solve this themselves using off-the-shelf tools. And hire a whole bunch of developers. Alex, that's what I'm telling my kids. Be developers. Everybody 5-10 years from now is going to be a programmer in some capacity. You got to know a little bit of coding. Engineers rule. We'll see how long I'll have a job in this particular role, but you gotta continue to develop new things.
Jace, I'm gonna sign up for code.org. I'm gonna sign up for code.org right after this call.
Yeah,
there you go.
Well,
I really enjoyed the conversation, Alex. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a topic. Yeah. I think there's topics I'd love to follow up on. I think sometimes you think about these issues, and the questions I have is about the developer always.
Right.
How do you not block the developer? How do you let them keep working, and how do you do that? Yeah. It'd be fun to get some people on to talk about that sometime. But I want to thank you all once again for taking the time to talk today. This has been great. The back and forth is terrific. So thank you all for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alex, for having us.
Thank you. That was great.
You're welcome.